I feel like I'm being real delulu about what I can manage to get read in the last few days of February, which is greatly influencing the books that I'm putting on my March TBR. So March is going to be an interesting month. I'm going to be showing you in this TBR the books that I should be reading in March. So that is book club books, Patreon picks, ARCs, library books. But if I'm being honest, I don't know the books that I'm actually going to be reading throughout the month because I'm currently preparing for a project that I should have started months ago and I have not, and now I'm kind of working down to the wire. So my main priorities in March are actually going to be Shelf It or Scrap It episode 14, which is a themed episode, but it is not one where I can know what books I'm going to be reading until the episode actually starts. And then there's this project that I should have started that, if I'm being honest, gets increasingly more intimidating every single day that I don't make progress on it, and it's gotten to the point where I wanted to chip away at it over a large period of time, and now I just don't have any time. So I'm going to be focusing all of my reading energy outside of my main book club read, outside Shelf It or Scrap It, on trying to finish this project throughout the month. And that one, I could tell you what books I'm going to be reading. Honestly, I haven't really talked about this project at all because I'm not convinced that I can pull it off. So I don't want to be giving you guys all these promises about content that you may never see. But if all goes well, you are going to be seeing that in April. So you'll understand very, very shortly what it is that I've been working on. So the books that I'm going to be showing in this video are the things that I ideally should be reading or would be reading if I did not have these other projects I needed to work on. Some of these have to be read throughout March, so they are definitely going to be done, but a lot of them I think are going to roll over into April, where I don't have any grand plans for April. I am going to be exceptionally busy, which I will talk about next month, but I don't have any grand plans in terms of reading. So my plan for next month is just to chip away at everything that has been piling up while I've been working on these other things, and hopefully these other things do come into fruition. I'm trying to be more efficient this year, and because of that be able to work on more ambitious projects, but I just feel like I'm full of good intentions and in reality time just slips away from me and I don't really know how. But anyway, getting into the actual TBR, the one book, I think the only one book from this TBR that you can guarantee I am going to read is Valor by John Gwynne. This is for Catch Up Book Club, which is my epic fantasy read along book club. If you are new to my channel and you don't know what Catch Up Book Club is, I will leave the announcement video for this round up above because we are currently at a point where you can still catch up. Probably not for the live show of this book, which will be early March, but definitely for book 3, which will be in May, if you are looking to get involved in this one before it gets too late. But I can confirm that the live show for Valor is going to be on the 9th of March on Zafina's channel. I don't think she will have it linked by the time this video goes up. I don't think the live show will have been scheduled, but I will link her channel down below so that you can be notified when that live show becomes available. And this one is the second book in the Faithful and the Fallen series. It is surrounding a war between giants and humans that has been dormant for a while. Throughout the first book, we are pretty much completely at peacetime. However, there are little rumblings going on throughout the course of book 1. In the history of this world, there was, let's say, a good god and a bad god. And when the bad god came into power and started to influence people, the good god abandoned civilization and has been lying dormant for a long time. So there is a prophecy in this world that there are going to be 2 influential figures, one that fights for the side of bad, one that fights for the side of good. And we are following this prophecy coming into fruition, where we are introduced to the key players who are going to play a pivotal role in this upcoming conflict. That is pretty much all I can say about this at this point. I'm very new to this series, so I haven't got my synopsis down yet, you know, the one that I tend to give over and over again throughout Catch Up Book Club. But it's very like Skyrim-esque in setting. It's dealing with things like Celtic and Old Norse mythology, the history and mythology that kind of surrounded the British Isles in like medieval history. And it's a multi-perspective fantasy where you don't always know why you're following particular perspectives, but eventually as the story progresses, they become more ingrained in the narrative and a little bit more relevant to what the eventual plot is going to be. It is hard for me at this point to give you any kind of good idea of what the plot of this series is, because we do mainly follow these characters in peacetime in book one, building up to a point where the world is thrown into conflict, which is a little bit more of what we're going to be seeing in book two. I'm very excited to read this one, and I am definitely, obviously because it's my book club, I'm definitely going to read this one at a pace of however many pages per day it takes me to read it between the 1st and the 9th of the month. It is a chunky one, but I don't find these books difficult to read, and it is 648 pages in total. While we're on the topic of book clubs, I do have my Patreon book club book. It is for the months of March and April though, so I don't think I'm going to be getting to it in March, but it is Lady of Ashes by Melissa K. Roerich. My Patreon book club is like a fantasy romance version of Catch Up Book Club where we read through series together, and this one is a fae romance series following an assassin who has fallen out of favor with the Assassin Lord, and she is given a job that she doesn't want to accept, but the Assassin Lord promises her that she will be able to gain revenge on the Fae Fire Prince who is responsible for the death of her mother if she accepts. So I've read the first two books in this series. I think they have a lot of flaws, like I have a lot of issues with them, and the main character is very irritating, but overall I actually do really enjoy this series, and I've heard that it comes into its own a little bit more from books 3 onward, so I'm very excited to see how that plays out. Don't think I'll be getting it to this month, but it's definitely something that if I could read it this month instead of having to push it forward into April, that wouldn't be a bad thing. I also have my unofficial Patreon read along where we are reading through the Pretty Little Liars series by Sarah Shepard. As you can tell, I'm a big fan of series read alongs. I like to hold myself accountable and hold everybody else who's reading along with me accountable as well to actually continuing on with series. So we are currently up to book 12 in the Pretty Little Liars series, which is Burned. I do not own this one right now because I have been getting all of the books in this series from Vinted up until this point, and because I'm entering into the last 5 books in this series, it's getting increasingly more difficult for me to find them at a reasonable price, because I don't want to be paying more than like £2 to £3 per book for these, if I'm being honest. But the Pretty Little Liars series is a young adult mystery series following a group of girls whose best friend went missing. Now this girl is the glue that was holding them all together, so they've drifted apart, but they do come back together to try and get to the bottom of a series of anonymous texts they've been receiving from somebody who signs their messages A. There was a very popular TV show created from this book series, which I know is how a lot of you guys will probably be familiar with this one, and it's very enjoyable. Like, it's very problematic, has a lot of toxic elements, but I just really like it. It's like a palate cleanser for me. It's fun, it's easy to read, it's fast paced, and I've been having a good time. So this one is book 12 and it marks the end of the 3rd story arc with just one more to go after this one. Now on to my Patreon picks. One that I am ashamed to still have in my TBRs is Daughter of the Drowned Empire by Frankie Diane Malice. Now I definitely intended to get to this one in February, but I did prioritize sequels and this is the start of a series, so I did push it off a little bit. I am still very excited to get to this one though. It is the first book in I think it's a fantasy romance series, but I do think it leans more on the fantastical scale than the romance. That's just the impression that I get from the synopsis of this. And if I remember correctly, it is following a young woman who is supposed to have magic, and I think she is a princess. She's 3rd in line to the seat of power, and she goes through this test that everyone has and discovers that there's something wrong with her magic or she doesn't have any, and she ends up having to train to be a warrior instead. I love like a military or warrior training academy. Actually, I think more than I enjoy a magic school, so I have high hopes for this one. I just haven't managed to get around to it yet, and if I do not get to it in March, this is top of my to read list for April. My other Patreon pick that I'm rolling over is February's pick, and I think that this was Caitlin's recommendation, and it is Rouge by Greer Rivers. So this one is available on Kindle Unlimited, and it is a billionaire romance with a happily ever after. I think it's the 2nd book in a series of standalones, and if I remember correctly, these are all retellings of classic plays. I can't remember if it's Shakespeare or whether it's just plays in general, but I'm very excited about that because of the drama that it adds. And this one, like I said, if I don't get to it in March, it will end up being a really quick, easy read, I think, when I do get around to it. And also it might be good to break up some of the other stuff I have to read in March if I can get to this one. So that leads us to our March Patreon pick. I mean, I did end up building up some Patreon picks a few months ago and I cleared through 3 of them in January. So it's not unusual for me to just like clear through 3 again, and that is definitely something that could be in my future. But if you're unfamiliar with the Patreon pick, every member of my inner circle tier can recommend a book that gets placed into this jar. Every month I pick one, and over the few months that follow, I will read it. So this month, I don't think I'm going to get to it in March, so I don't think I have a preference, but because I am going to have a little bit of a build up of books that I haven't managed to get to, I'm hoping for something that is easy. And I feel like because I've said that, I'm going to pull out one of the thick epic fantasies that's in here. So I'll go for this one, which is purple. I think purple is 2024. I know yellow is before 23. This one, Dungeon Crawler Carl. This one's Debbie's pick. I am very, very curious about this. It is not a book that I own, but it is a book that I hear a lot of people talking about. I'm glad that it has a new cover, because when I first looked this up, I was immediately put off by the original cover of this one. It's lit RPG. That makes a lot of sense. So this is amazing. Even though this has been picked up by a traditional publisher, it is still available on Kindle Unlimited. So that is probably how I will read it, and also makes it a great contender for my April reading. So this seems a little bit reminiscent of Ready Player One, which is one of my favorite books. The reason why I have been unsure about this, like this has a 4.53 average rating on Goodreads. Everything that I have heard about this has been positive. I just really don't know if this is for me. So I've tried a lit RPG before, and if you guys don't know what that genre is, it is essentially like fantasy or sci-fi books that read like video games. So you have things like the questing elements in them, which for me got a little bit repetitive. But the thing that makes me unsure about Dungeon Crawler Carl is that it seems like it's a little bit silly goofy, and I don't typically like that. In the latest episode of Shelf It or Scrap It, I said that I'm a serious person that likes serious books, and things that play with the conventions of genres in a way that not pokes fun at it in a malicious way, but does put a humorous spin on things, I guess in maybe a satirical light, or just to highlight certain conventions and make humor out of them. I don't love it, because like I don't think there's anything wrong with it, and there's definitely a place for satire and parody and twisting conventions and turning them into something new, doing something different with them. I definitely understand the need for that and the place for that in literature. I just don't really like it, and I feel like Dungeon Crawler Carl is going to have that kind of element, which is what has been putting me off a little bit. But I can't ignore that everybody has been having such a good time and really enjoying this series. So what I can tell from the synopsis of this is that it is set in our world, but all of the buildings have like flattened and turned into or sunk into the earth and become a dungeon. And there's a big competition that is either televised or broadcast somehow of people traversing the dungeon that is actually the world. And when you enter the dungeon, you can't get out. So it's like this big game show combined with like the typical lit RPG questing element. I'm unsure, but I'm very open to it given how much I know a bunch of people love this one. So thank you actually, Debbie, for making me finally get around to testing this one out. I do have an arc for, I'm pretty sure it's for the 6th of May, but my time in April is going to be limited. So if I could read this sooner rather than later, it would be preferable. And that is The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. So this one is Joe Abercrombie's newest release. If you followed the last era of Catch Up Book Club, we read the entirety of Joe Abercrombie's first Law World, and it was very hit or miss for me. There were elements that I loved and elements that I did not like. So I've been interested in trying something else out from Joe Abercrombie, but I know I've heard a lot of good things about his Half a World series, but I was more interested in his adult stuff, and seeing as this is new, it's going to be buzzy. It was a good one for me to give a try. It was on my anticipated releases, and I was also lucky enough to receive this limited edition arc from Galanx, so thank you very much to Galanx for that. So this one is set in our world, or at least a version of our world. I don't know if it's in the UK, but it's definitely across Europe, and it's sometime in history. I'm terrible at history, so I'm not going to guess at the time period, but we are following a priest who has been given a congregation of like thieves, demons, and dark magic wielders to convert to, I'm assuming, Christianity. So I'm actually interested in this because as somebody who isn't religious and knowing that Joe Abercrombie does have that satirical style, like one of the reasons I don't love Joe Abercrombie is because he does twist the conventions of the genre and poke fun at them a little bit. But I think that this could be especially interesting when we're talking about Christianity throughout here, because I do feel like it is going, well, it's definitely set at a time period where Christianity is like dominant across Europe. And I do think as well this will be the book for me that decides whether I like Joe Abercrombie and will continue to read his works or whether he's just not for me. I just have one library book left. My final surviving library book is The Hitchcock Hotel by Stephanie Roble, and it's not because the September House went back to the library, guys. I've actually started the audiobook and I'm really enjoying it. But The Hitchcock Hotel, I'm not sure if it is a thriller or a horror, but it is following a guy who owns a hotel that is dedicated to Alfred Hitchcock's movies. So every room is themed, and he invites a bunch of people that I think he went to college with to come and stay at the hotel, and one by one they start to die. I'm a little bit wary of this because I feel like it can have a murder mystery element, like it's reminiscent of And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie in the setup that I've just described at least. But I do really love Hitchcock movies, and that is the main reason why I've been drawn to this book. And then the final book that I have for my March TBR is one that I may be starting in February, but I don't think I'll have finished it by the time March starts, and that is Sunbringer by Hannah Kaner. So I'm buddy reading this one with Aaron from Booked and Busy, and we just haven't got around to starting it yet. I think that the third book is released in March, or maybe it was released in February. I ordered the Illumicrate edition anyway, and I'm pretty sure it has not yet arrived or been dispatched, but that one is Faithbreaker. And after we've read Sunbringer, I'm assuming, providing we both also still enjoy this series, we are going to be moving on to Faithbreaker soon as well. But this one is the sequel to Godkiller, which is about a god killer, no shit, and she meets a young girl who is tethered to a god, and they can't figure out how to like they shouldn't be attached to start off with, but they can't figure out how to be separated from each other. So the god killer Kissan takes this little girl to an abandoned city where the gods are still very much present, where they are currently not in the rest of the kingdom, and tries to find a solution to this little girl's problem. And then we're also following a retired knight who has also been sent to this city by the king to try and find a cure to something that is draining the life from his king. Really enjoyed book one. I'm excited to see where the plot goes in book two, and I'm very excited to experience more of Hannah Kaner's writing. Oh my god, I'm actually going to a Hannah Kaner event, I forgot, for Faithbreaker in March. It doesn't matter because I'm not taking my books because they're already signed, but I keep forgetting about that. I'm glad I need to check it's on my calendar so I don't forget to actually go. So here are some of the books that I'm probably actually not going to be getting to in March. There are 4 ebooks to also add to this, of course, which is Lady of Ashes. Burned is not an ebook. I just need to figure out how to get a copy. There's also Rouge by, is it Greer Rivers, and then Dungeon Crawler Carl to be added to this TBR. I am hoping to get through a couple of these throughout March. I do really need to lock in when it comes to reading throughout the month so that I can get through everything that I need to, and hopefully have a little bit of time to read some of the things from the stack as well. As always, I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic, but we'll see what happens. We'll see what the month of March has in store for me. But down in my comments, let me know which of the books on your March TBR you are most excited to get to this month. And if you guys would like to let me know you were here but you don't feel like you have anything to say, leave me a sun emoji for Sunbringer. But aside from that, guys, I do hope that you have enjoyed this video. If you have, please don't forget to like if you liked it and subscribe if you wanna. If you head into my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, my Instagram, and my Patreon if you would like to join me on any of those. But that's it from me today, guys. Bye.
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you will go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.